Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to see everybody. Hope you are doing well this evening. I am currently double checking and making sure everything is up and running the way it's supposed to. I am from coming to you from home tonight on this last night, and so I don't have my normal setup, and so I'm making sure I have everything set up where I need to go. Hope you're able to tune in with us. If you're not, I know that we had the last week where I had to delay just because it was the end of the semester and had lots of stuff going on around me. And so I wanted to finish up with at least the last chapter. We're going to do book 4, chapter 9 tonight. And that is the last chapter that we're going to be able to do. I'm going to post and go back and actually give you guys all of the PowerPoints from this year, what we've been able to do. Super excited, so grateful for each and every one of you guys that has participated throughout this entire semester with me, with all of us here on campus and also all over the world. As y'all have noticed, we've had people from China to Washington State to Georgia to Florida to Texas to I think we even had someone from Maine and Vermont earlier this year. So just super grateful for your consistent presence. And for those of you watching after the fact, there's so many of you that are watching now through YouTube and lots of different places. Just so grateful for your presence, your time, and for your watching along with us. If you're watching this after the fact right now, I know a lot of you have mentioned to me that you wouldn't be able to be live tonight, but I'm grateful for each and every one of you that has made this really, truly a special semester. And I am unbelievably excited about next semester. As some of you have already seen in the group, I posted kind of the highlight of what's upcoming with the screw tape letters and the links to where you can get the books for that starting in January. Cannot wait for that. And I'm also very excited to let you all know that, believe it or not, we actually have an app coming out next month. And that app will include the live streams from these type of events, from what we're doing on these nights. And so even if you're traveling about, you can pop up on your phone. You can download the app. Is completely free. And you'll have a list of all of our previous studies, so from Mere Christianity, but also some of the other stuff that we do with the Buckeyes for Christ and with the Church of Christ on Fishinger Road. So I'm planning on doing some classes on philosophy, some classes on the book of James, some classes obviously on the screw tape letter, lots of different opportunities. And that app will also include the opportunity for you to actually use, if you've got Roku or Apple TV and the rest, you can also watch there. That app will also be online. So I think it's Amazon, Roku, and Apple TV. The app will be live there. Super excited about that. So not just on your computers or if you're watching on your phones, but also on your TVs going forward. So just can't wait. I've spent the last 3 or 4 days kind of building that out, getting that ready. As per usual, if you're online, feel free to tune in and let me know where you're coming from. I always love knowing where you guys are coming from. I'm grateful for you, like as I noted, your continued presence, and excited about this. So tonight we're just going to do the first of these last 3 chapters because, candidly, there's a way that the chapter 9 finishes that I just love, and I think it's the best way possible to kind of close out our study that we've done through this year. And I do have a couple chapters I'm going to go back and create some videos later on and kind of add them into the mix. But right now, this is kind of where we're at. A good way to wrap this all up. Super excited about it. So without further ado, we'll dive into book 4, chapter 9 of Mere Christianity. And this counting the cost is the kind of the topic, the premise here, which is why I think it's so such a foundational way in which we can kind of end our study of Mere Christianity together. He starts off by saying this. I find a good many people have been bothered by what I said in the previous chapter about our Lord's words, be ye perfect. Some people seem to think this means unless you are perfect, I will not help you. And as we cannot be perfect, then if he means that, our position is hopeless. But I do not think he did mean that. I think he meant the only help I will give you is help to become perfect. You may want something less, but I will give you nothing less. And this is something paramount, so important for us to grasp, because he's going to really get at something that I think is very important for all of us to really grab hold of and realize when it comes to our faith. And he says, let me explain. When I was a child, I often had a toothache, and I knew that if I went to my mother, she would give me something which would deaden the pain for that night and let me go to sleep. But I did not go to my mother, at least not till the pain became very bad. And the reason I did not go was this. I did not doubt she would give me the aspirin, but I knew she would also do something else. I knew she would take me to the dentist the next morning. That's a key component. I could not get what I wanted out of her without getting something more, which I did not want. I wanted immediate relief from pain, but I could not get it without having my teeth set permanently right. And I knew those dentists. I knew they started fiddling about with all sorts of other teeth which had not yet begun to ache. They would not let sleeping dogs lie. If you gave them an inch, they took an eel. And this is just a massive premise, and I love this analogy that he sets forth. And the main reason I love this analogy so much is because it really is the way that God works, in which we think we want a particular thing, and so we need some support. But what God has in mind for us is so much more. He doesn't want to just change, oftentimes, our simple outward behavior. He wants to change our hearts, which means that we often get more than what we actually want in that moment. We want the small thing, the almost insignificant fix. It'll seem important for us in the moment, deadening the pain of that moment. But in reality, something more needs to take place for true transformation to come about. Now, if I may put it that way, our Lord is like the dentist. If you give him an inch, he will take an ell. Dozens of people go to him to be cured of some one particular sin which they are ashamed of, like masturbation or physical cowardice, or which is obviously spoiling daily life, like bad temper or drunkenness. Well, he will cure it all right, but he will not stop there. That may be all you ask, but if once you call him in, he will give you the full treatment. And this is really where he's getting at that very premise. That is why he won people to count the cost before becoming Christians. Make no mistake, he says, if you let me, I will make you perfect. The moment you put yourself in my hands, that is what you're in for. Nothing less or other than that. You have free will, and if you choose, you can push me away. But if you do not push me away, understand that I am going to see this job through. And I love this premise. Whatever suffering it may cost you in your earthly life, whatever inconceivable purification it may cost you after death, whatever it costs me, I will never rest nor let you rest until you are literally perfect, until my Father can say without reservation that he is well pleased with you, as he said he was well pleased with me. This I can do and will do, but I will not do anything less. In fact, I love this whole premise also because it kind of takes away the underlying premise that so many people buy into, where I see people who go through the religious premises. They go to church, but they have no joy in their life. They don't really know God. They have all of the rules and regulations often associated with faith and religion, but none of the joy, none of the life. But they pretend that they're really been saved, but nothing's actually happened. There's been no change in their life. They're not different. They are the same person. They have all the bad things, all the negative things that are often associated, because they don't understand what the value of them is and how they actually can change and ultimately change an individual. And yet, this is the other and equally important side of it. This helper who will, in the long run, be satisfied with nothing less than absolute perfection will also be delighted with the first feeble, stumbling efforts you make tomorrow to do the simplest duty. And I love this because this is very true. That when I look at it, he's going to give some analogies in a second. When my child first learns to walk and first learned to do this thing, I was so excited about the first step. My daughter now, my oldest is 15, and candidly, I don't really think much about her steps now outside of the actual fact of what is she doing, where is she going, how is she comporting herself, is she a believer, does she love God, is she kind to people. But I don't worry about her steps the way that I did when she was a very infant child. It's the same thing with God. That the simplest moments in our spiritual walk, as we're beginning that walk, God celebrates those small moments along the way. As a great Christian writer, George MacDonald, and he is, one of my favorites. If you haven't read George MacDonald, you need to. Pointed out, every father is pleased at the baby's first attempt to walk. No father would be satisfied with anything less than a firm, free, manly walk in a grown-up son. In the same way, he said, God is easy to please but hard to satisfy, and I love that. The practical upshot is this. On the one hand, God's demand for perfection need not discourage you in the least in your present attempts to be good, or even in your present failures. Each time you fall, he will pick you up again, and he knows perfectly well that your own efforts are never going to bring you anywhere near perfection. On the other hand, you must realize from the outset that the goal towards which he is beginning to guide you is absolute perfection. And no power in the whole universe except you yourself can prevent him from taking you to that goal. And what he means here is by this is you have the free will to decide whether or not this happens or not. You have the ability to deny God or to say, yes, God, do with me as you will. That is what you are in for. and it is very important to realize that. If we do not, then we are very likely to start pulling back and resisting him after a certain point. I think that many of us, when Christ has enabled us to overcome one or two sins that were an obvious nuisance, or are inclined to feel, though we do not put it in these words, that we are now good enough. And I'm just going to stop there for a second, because boy, has that not been a reality for so many I know, and from moments in my own life where it feels like I'm doing enough. Like I'm a good enough person. Why do I have to do more than this? Why do I have to also do that? That there may just be moments where we fall into this kind of pattern of just thinking, well, I've done enough. At least I'm not that guy, but I've done enough. Just leave me alone. And he says, he has done all we wanted him to do, and we should be obliged if he would now leave us alone. As we say, I never expected to be a saint. I only wanted to be a decent, ordinary chap. And we imagine when we say this that we are being humble. And that is kind of a true thing. But this is a fatal mistake. Of course, we never wanted and never asked to be made into the sort of creatures he is going to make us into. But the question is not what we intended ourselves to be, but what he intended us to be when he made us. He is the inventor. We are only the machine. He is the painter. We are only the picture. How should we know what he means for us to be? You see, he has already made us something very different from what we were. Long ago, before we were born, when we were inside of our mother's bodies, we passed through various stages. And this is, you have to remember, 1950s, 1940s, 50s, and so he's going to utilize terminology that would be not necessarily the analogies and the rest that we use today. We were once a rather like vegetables, and another rather like fish. It was only at a later stage that we became like human babies. And if we had been conscious at those earlier stages, I dare say we should have been quite content to stay as a vegetable or fish, should not have wanted to be made into babies. But all the time, he knew his plan for us and was determined to carry it out. Something the same is now happening at a higher level. We may be content to remain what we call ordinary people, but he is determined to carry out a quite different plan. To shrink back from this plan is not humility, it is laziness and cowardice. To submit to it is not conceit or megalomania, it is obedience. Here's another way of putting the two sides of this truth. On the one hand, we must never imagine that our own unaided efforts can be relied on to carry us even through the next 24 hours as decent people. If he does not support us, not one of us is safe from some gross sin. On the other hand, no possible degree of holiness or heroism which has ever been recorded of the greatest saints is beyond what he is determined to produce in every one of us in the end. The job will not be completed in this life, but he means to get us as far as possible before death. That is why we must not be surprised if we are in for a rough time. When a man turns to Christ and seems to be getting on pretty well, in the sense that some of his bad habits are now corrected, he often feels that would now be a natural if things were fairly smoothly. When troubles come along, illnesses, money troubles, new kinds of temptation, he is disappointed. These things, he feels, might have been necessary to rouse him and make him repent in his bad old days. But why now? Because God is forcing him on or up to a higher level, putting him into situations where he will have to be very much braver, or more patient, or more loving than he ever dreamed of being before. It seems to us all unnecessary, but that is because we have not yet had the slightest notion of the tremendous things he meant to make for us, to make of us. And this is one of the key components that I share with college students all the time and with you. And I'll just note this, that we have a very small-minded premise of what the expectations are of us, of God. We just don't think of ourselves in that way, that he has something more expected from us than where we are. And when it comes down to it, especially when it comes to trial and temptation, and especially trials, the trials that God places before us are meant to help grow us. They're meant to move us beyond just the moments that we're in. I'm not supposed to react as a 41-year-old as I did when I was 22 to a given situation. I'm meant to have grown from that, which should mean I can handle more things differently than I once handled them at a different time. That we are meant to have grown beyond just where we once were. That God has plans beyond where we once were. I find I must borrow yet another parable from George MacDonald. You see, look, even C.S. Lewis references him multiple times. You'd love him if you ever had a chance to read him. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right, stopping the leaks in the roof, and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were going to be made into a decent little cottage. But he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. The command be ye perfect is not idealistic gas, nor it is a command to do the impossible. He is going to make us into creatures that can obey that command. He said in the Bible that we were gods, and he is going to make good his words. And you have to understand the terminology and the way he's utilizing it here. Not that we become gods, but we become sons of God. If we let him, for we can prevent him if we choose, he will make the feeblest and filthy of us into a god or goddess, a dazzling, radiant, immortal creature, pulsating all through with such energy and joy and wisdom and love as we cannot now imagine, a bright, stainless mirror which reflects back to God perfectly, though of course on a smaller scale, his own boundless power and delight and goodness. The process will be long, and its parts very painful, but that is what we are in for. Nothing less. He meant what he said. And that is the key premise that I kind of want to close out on that, because he's really getting at one of the key components when it comes to this. His own boundless power and delight and goodness is what we are to reflect into the world. The process will be long and in parts very painful. And I don't know about you, but in my experience in life, that has been the case at times. Now, I know that there are many out there who have gone through much harder trials and tribulations, but in the same way, I don't want to diminish the things that God has set before me in my own life that I've had to overcome, opportunities, often at times my own self-inflicted wounds that I have created for myself, where my selfishness, my vain conceit, my ego, whatever it may be, has gotten in the way of what God intends for me. But he has something more in store, and that's why I felt this was such a fantastic moment to kind of close out this entire series on, because to me, Mere Christianity in the end is what God has in store for us. It's so much more than just the philosophy of that there is a God and God is alive and that God is well, but that God has a purpose and a plan for each one of us. And that's what I wanted to set before you. That's what I wanted you to know this evening, that I'm grateful for your time, for your presence, for the way that you have studied with me along through these chapters, and I will put the other chapters up here in a little bit. And I'm just so grateful for all that you have done in your own personal story, for the messages that you've shared with me, the encouragement you've given me as we've gone through this study. And let me encourage you to keep going. I try to reread this book once every year, every 2 years, give or take, because there's little other insights along the way that I find that I really enjoy. And so I definitely, as always, I highly recommend Mere Christianity to all of you out there if you get an opportunity to read it. I hope you're just as excited about what's coming next semester. In fact, it all starts January 11th. The Screw Tape Letters is what we're diving into. So excited about that. I can't wait to get into the depths of that whole entire thing. And grateful to hopefully have you along with me. For those of you who weren't here right at the beginning or you're watching this later, live right now, don't forget we got an app. An app's coming out here in January, Lord willing, and you'll be able to live stream all of these sessions through the app too. Also, the app will be on your TV. So if you've got Apple TV or Roku or Amazon, you'll be able to download our app and be able to watch on your TV or watch from wherever you are at any point in time. But for me, closing out tonight, I just want to say to you, thank you for being with me for these last 3 months as we've studied through this whole entire book. And I can't wait for the next one. I love you all. If I can be of service to you in any way, shape, or form, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you any way I can. Look forward to seeing you all on the other side. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. We'll see you in the new year. Get to reading. It's going to be a great one. We'll see you all soon.